Good evening, everyone. Good evening to all the folks who make up our resilient and amazing learning communities. We see you, educators, students, parents, grandparents, guardians, and community members. And I want to give a special shout out to our early education teachers and students. The school year for most of us will end in 3 weeks, but early education folks keep the learning going all year long. We appreciate you, we see you, and we love you. Today's updates include UTLA's student-centered proposals for next school year and an update on our work to fulfill the promise for our special needs students. As usual, we lead with a health and safety update. It has been a month since all LAUSD schools have been physically reopened, and the number of serious problems related to health and safety have stayed very small. Protocols for masking, distancing, ventilation, cleaning, and daily disinfecting are in place. Folks, keep your school-based COVID task force meeting every week and stay vigilant in these final weeks. It wasn't always easy to stand up for these needed protocols. Educators faced a lot of pressure to return to schools without agreed upon health and safety procedures. But we held the line because we are a fighting union that centers our students and communities in the work we do. It was said during the pandemic that the best protection against COVID is having a union. That is powerful. And because we have the privilege to work with young people, our fight for safety protected tens of thousands of families outside our union too. Be proud of that. I know I am. Now we are bargaining with the district on necessary conditions for schools to physically open in a traditional model for next school year. The district has signaled that it plans to fully reopen with an overwhelming majority of staff and students physically attending school 5 days per week, unless pandemic conditions change for the worst. There will be a virtual option for families who choose it, and the district has acknowledged that some staff members may need to stay at home for health reasons. This week, UTLA made an initial proposal to the district on the supports our students need for a healthy, healing, and equitable return. LAUSD will be receiving between $2 billion and $4 billion in one-time money for pandemic recovery and additional increases in ongoing state funding when the state budget is passed. For the first time in decades, we have the funding to dream big and fight forward for our students. Our contract proposals are what our students have long deserved and what they need now more than ever to process the fallout of this unprecedented pandemic. If funding choices do not meet the social, emotional needs of students and families who have had to deal with the loss over this past year, they are missing the mark. UTLA folks, look for your email Friday night for more details, but here are some highlights of the proposals we presented this week. Students deserve healthy and safe schools. Our proposal would maintain critical health and safety protocols that have proven to keep our communities safer, such as masking, COVID testing, distancing, ventilation, cleaning and disinfecting, and school-based COVID-19 compliance task force. Students deserve lower class sizes so they can get the individualized attention and academic support they need. Our proposal would bring an additional 1,000 elementary and secondary teachers, educators to our classrooms. We cannot go back to having 50 students in a chemistry class jostling over 2 Bunsen burners, or 45 students in a middle school English class sharing 30 textbooks. It doesn't work. Students deserve expanded social emotional support. Our proposal would bring 1,800 new psychologists, counselors, pupil service and attendance counselors, psychiatric social workers to one-on-one work with our students as they recover from the trauma of the pandemic. Students deserve stability. Our proposal would prevent the district triggered displacement of teachers to another school for the 21-22 school year, and no combo classes for elementary schools. Students with special needs deserve support. Our proposal would expand direct support for special education students who have suffered from the lack of access to the services they need by bringing 300 new special education educators and 300 new DIS providers to work with our students. Students deserve a rich curriculum that connects with their hearts and minds. Our proposal would expand arts, music, and drama instruction by hiring 50 new itinerant art educators. Students deserve the very best educators. It is clear that we have to grapple with the historic shortage of educators in the labor market, a trend that has been exacerbated by the grueling year of our learning communities. We must figure out how to attract and retain educators. And our proposals include an ongoing salary increase for current educators and a signing bonus to attract new hires. This week, we have launched a physical reopening survey for UTLA members to get your feedback on how you have experienced the physical reopening of schools and to get input on how the additional money should be spent. Please have a chapter meeting to discuss the survey and encourage all of your colleagues to participate in this survey. Member feedback will help prioritize and crystallize our demands at the table. The deadline to complete the physical reopening survey is Tuesday, May 25th at 5 p.m. As always, we will keep you updated with developments in bargaining. And I have to tell you, I just must tell you that saying these proposals out loud, thinking about their impact on our babies, and knowing that the funding is there if we fight for it, is so empowering. It is true that many of us are still struggling during this pandemic and still in the depths of fatigue, frustration, isolation, anxiety, anger, and more. But the possibilities are bright points of light ahead. As part of the same struggle on a different playing field, we are working with the Reclaim Our Schools Los Angeles Coalition to force the district to build their budget for next year around a similar set of demands that meets the needs of our students and their communities. Reclaim Our Schools Los Angeles is a parent, youth, community, educator coalition that we helped to form in 2016. Reclaim Our Schools Los Angeles has been critical to helping us win our strike, helping us win our common good demands, getting community schools off the ground in Los Angeles and now expanded, helping to win police-free schools, slamming the LA Times bias, and winning a healthy and safe return, and more. Now, Reclaim Our Schools Los Angeles is leading a campaign to pressure the LA School Board to spend massive amounts of new federal and state money in LAUSD in a racially just, educationally just way. The action plan builds towards June 22nd, when the LAUSD School Board passes its budget. Parent and student leaders with Reclaim Our Schools met with UTLA chapter leaders this week at our area meetings to talk about the escalating campaign of rallies, school board visits, and news conferences to get folks involved. This is the time as a union and as a part of our Reclaim Our Schools coalition to fight for transformational change in our public schools and our society. When we talk about all the amazing support our students get in our public schools, that includes our fantastic speech and language pathologists. Wednesday was National Speech and Language Pathologist Day, and we want to call out our amazing UTLA folks doing this work and giving our students a voice. If you know a speech and language pathologist, it is not too late to give them some love and let them know how critical their work is to our students' success and well-being. And now a quick update on Fulfill the Promise, the coalition that UTLA helped build and that is driving a national civil rights campaign for our students with special needs. This week, the National Education Association held a Fulfill the Promise webinar with folks across the country, moderated by NEA President Becky Pringle. I and UTLA Elementary Vice President Gloria Martinez were proud to take part and uplift the coalition's demands. As we go from global pandemic to recovery in our schools, now is the time for the federal government to fulfill the promise made in 1975 to America's students to fund the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act at 40% and to provide a free and appropriate education for all students with disabilities. Joining us was Powerhouse Mama Melina Espiritu Azocar, one of the parents who filed a legal petition with the U.S. Department of Education in support of students like her daughter. Let us watch a clip of some of what she had to say.
We need an equitable system that prioritizes kids. We need funding. And as I stated before, Texas is in a $2 billion shortfall, and we need these funds to ensure that our children get equal access to accommodations, programs, personnel, licensed counselors, licensed social workers, and advocates that can help guide and assist parents. We need more. We can't ensure equity with the current system in place. The federal government promised to fund IDEA, and we need them to hold to that promise and finally provide the funding needed to ensure equity. We cannot allow the systematic discrimination that has occurred with students of color for years. We must do better. We must all imagine that each child is our own, and remember, we would do anything for our own child. We need to value and empower all parents and especially families of color, and we must all stand tall and united and together to fight this battle. Our children will not be ignored. And I can tell you tonight that I have the spirit of all the other mothers standing united in our coalition. And we're going to say that we will not stop fighting for the rights of our kids and all the other kids that come after our own.
Melina, speaking truth and everyone needs to listen. When Congress fails to fulfill its promise to IDEA, to fund IDEA, and to protect the civil rights of students with disabilities, then schools, students, families, and communities suffer. We will keep up the pressure and the strategic action to do better by our students with special needs. Now an update on the CDC and wearing masks as protection from COVID. As most of us know by now, last week, the CDC unexpectedly issued a new recommendation that fully vaccinated people no longer need to wear masks indoors. What did not get as much news coverage is this. A few days later, the CDC issued an updated recommendation that schools keep to the current COVID-19 guidelines, including mask wearing and distancing. The updated recommendation came after an outcry over the abrupt shift and concerns raised by essential workers and vulnerable communities. Let us be clear. Masks are still required in LA Unified Schools, and they are a critical part of how we keep our communities safe. This is how we help protect children too young to be vaccinated and the many immune compromised people who are not fully protected by the vaccine. Even as California celebrates improved COVID rates and moves toward a full reopening, the troubling racial disparity in vaccination rates in Los Angeles County persists, with Black and Brown residents and people in disadvantaged communities continuing to be vaccinated at lower rates than other residents. These are the communities we serve and the families we need to center in all decisions about health and safety. Now, I will end with a reckoning with history. This week, the 3 known survivors of the 1921 race massacre in Tulsa, Oklahoma, appeared before a congressional committee to call for justice and for the country to officially acknowledge the massacre ahead of the 100th anniversary on May 31st and June 1st. Survivors Viola Ford Fletcher, Hughes Van Ellis, and Leslie Benningfield Randall described the absolute horror of the violence they saw that day in Tulsa, during which white mobs gunned down Black people in the streets and burned Black-owned businesses to the ground. The massacre, which is rarely mentioned in history textbooks, was among the worst attacks of racial violence in US history. Fletcher, who is 107 years young, said she still remembered seeing Black men being shot and bodies in the street. She could smell the smoke and hear the screams. She was 7 at the time. These survivors are sharing their brutal but necessary stories at the same time as lawmakers in 15 states are trying to pass legislation that would silence educators from talking to students about the role of racism, sexism, and oppression throughout the United States history. In response, educators across the US are signing a pledge to teach the truth. While we have not seen legislation like this in California, the threat to teaching and the need for solidarity is everywhere. Educators are for truth telling and for uplifting the power of education to move us toward a more just society. Look for more about this fight on our social media pages. Until next time, lean into your weekend. This is your time to relax, rejuvenate, and rest. Read a book, kick up your feet on the sofa, take a nap. Do the things that you need to do for your self-care. Stay strong, folks. Stay UTLA strong, because together we rise.